What's up, guys? Welcome to Knockers on the Bottom. I'm your host, Jay Miller. Jay Miller, if you like. So let's get into it. Um, the season's officially over. Super Bowl happened. I'm so upset. Philadelphia won. It's a pain in the butt to sit over there and watch your division rival, do the things that you want to do, like win Super Bowls and go to championship games and sign good players and seem to be pushing all the right buttons and have players making tons of money and they're not in salary cap hell, at least not just yet. So it's just, you get to watch an organization that runs very, very well, and there's a lot of professional jealousy there. Um, but nevertheless, it's all over. They get to celebrate, they get to tear their city apart. And in the meantime, we all get to go back to kind of starting from ground zero and rebuilding the team, right? So it looks like in a couple of weeks we'll have the scouting combine. I've been really trying to hold back my breakdowns of certain draft picks as far as specific players until after the combine, because things tend to shift and move a lot at that point. Like everybody's talking about right now mock drafting Ashton Genty to the Dallas Cowboys. Now, if Ashton Genty goes out there and runs in the mid to low 4.4s, I don't think he's going to be there when the Cowboys pick, right? Because there's going to be too much juice in his game for him to stay around to the 12th pick. And God forbid he goes out there and runs in the mid to high 4.3s. Then he's definitely not going to be there. He's probably going, to Chicago and Ben Johnson, which I think that's, if I had to put some bets on it, I kind of feel that's where he's going anyway. But nevertheless, if he goes out there and shows any sort of breakaway speed, it's probably over for that on that pick. But that's just some of the things that can happen, right? We have so right now everybody's talking about, hey man, we've got about 10 to at the most 15 first round grades on players. But after the scouting combine, we could be up to 18 to 20. So it's those types of things. I want to see how McMillan runs. Luther Burden looks like a burner. LB3, as I've coined it, because it's Luther Burden the third. But let's see how he runs. He goes out there and he runs, he could run himself right into a Cowboys uniform. So there's just a lot of different moving parts, which is why you haven't seen any episodes, except for I did one mock draft episode just to kind of see what the early returns are right now. But all that's going to change here in a couple of weeks. So that'll be nice to see. You also have the UFL going on, which is not, a ton of interest in that, except for the Cowboys got Brandon Arbery and Cavante Turpin from there. And then they also had a linebacker kind of try out with the team and make the practice squad from there last year as well. So you just never know, especially with the Cowboys being, I hate to use the term bottom fishers, but that's kind of what they are when it comes to trying to acquire talent. They kind of turn over every rock except the rocks that they should, like free agency, like trades, two major parts of team building. They leave those stones turned, right? They don't turn those stones over. But when it comes to UFL guys and undrafted free agents and bottom of the barrel free agents, that's where they love to play. And being that they did do some nice things with the head coach staff, the coaching staff this offseason, it does give me pause in saying that they won't do something different because they're already doing something different, and this is all I can judge them on is what they've done to this point. But the real test will really be free agency. It's still not smart for any team or any franchise, just to be clear. It's not smart for any franchise unless you just are the Commanders with $100 million in cap space, or the Patriots with $100 million in cap space, right? So you have to spend money. Unless you're one of those franchises who just is flush with tons of cap space, it really doesn't make sense to play in the first day of free agency, right? That's usually where your most overpaid free agents go. And, not very rarely, but let's say you know, 50-50, maybe a little less than 50-50. Those guys end up working out, for every time you see a team that puts big money on a free agent and it works out, you see a ton of other teams trying to get out of those contracts within 2 years. So that's probably not the smartest place to play, but maybe the second wave of free agency. The Cowboys usually wait till about the fourth or fifth wave. The Cowboys are usually there about, 3 weeks before the draft, trying to sign some bottom of the barrel guys that are still left on the scrap heap to fill out their roster. And then they're there, into training camp, trying to add guys late to help themselves out. Carl Lawson, Jordan Phillips, things like that, to try to see, Linville Joseph, if they could do some things to help out their team. But by then, everybody's already in training camp. Everybody's already been practicing. Everybody's already in shape. And as you saw with Carl Lawson, even though he had a fairly good season, and I would like to see the Cowboys try to retain him, it took him, 5-6 weeks to kind of get into the flow. And that's just because the Cowboys kind of, the way they played it, they played it like they either didn't want to do anything or they didn't know what they wanted to do. Either way, it's troublesome, right? So I'd like to see them get in on the second wave of free agency, the third wave of free agency. I'd like to see them go after players that are not just warm bodies, because in years past, let's throw this past season out where they didn't do anything, and let's chalk that up to they didn't want to add to this roster. They felt like they might move on from Mike McCarthy, so they didn't want to necessarily throw a bunch of money at this current version of the roster, because they didn't even know who their coach and their scheme was going to be, right? But now going into this season, I don't want to see them do what they did in, let's say, 2023, 2022, right? Where they ended up throwing just what I call warm bodies at the different positions in need. Players that are really not going to move the needle, right? But you just want them there so that you can just try to draft as pure as possible and then hope that these players have either a resurgence in their career or end up being okay players for you depth-wise. Now, sometimes it works out, right? Sometimes you get a Dante Fowler, which it did work out for them. But for every Dante Fowler, there's a Terrell McClain, there's a Gerald McCoy, players that just never really worked out. Ha Clinton Dix. The list goes on. The Cowboys always do this. You got Royce Freeman this year. So the Cowboys are just one of those teams that when they sign and try to get warm bodies into a position so that they can just have some roster depth and hope that those guys have a resurgence in their career, that's not really going to work out too well. Now, you can get, the Eagles got a Zach Bond, because Bond probably made himself a crap load of money this year after signing a very low-level deal and basically being one of the Eagles' best players on defense this past season. So it can work out for you, but it works out for you in positions like that, right? Linebacker, positions that are typically cheap in the NFL to begin with. You can do that with running back. You can do that with linebacker. You can do that to some extent with, strong safety, but in the money positions, the corners, edge players, offensive line, defensive line, wide receivers, you kind of have to go out and if you really want to sign someone, you got to sign someone that's going to move the needle for you. So I don't want to see the Cowboys going out and trying to, convert all these players' contracts into signing bonuses, freeing up $80 to $90 million in cap space, and then just kind of going after every big fish they can. I don't think that's a smart way to do it, even though some people act like that's what the Cowboys should do. But I also don't want to see them sit on their hands and take their small amount of cap space and wait to extend Micah Parsons and kind of take their little bit of cap space and maybe sign like a couple of scrap heap guys and then some undrafted free agents and then try to play it like, oh, we don't have any more money, we signed, we used it all on the undrafted free agents and those low-level guys and we have to carry it over for Micah and this. If you re-sign Micah right now, you will create cap space. That before you even have to flip any triggers in CeeDee Lamb's contract or Dak Prescott's contract. You can create, I don't know, $16, $18, $20 million in cap space just by signing Micah Parsons to a long-term deal. right? And you can massage his cap hit out over a number of years so that you don't have to flip any triggers on his contract, but you can keep that number low. That's all in the Cowboys' hands right now. Micah seems like he's ready to play ball. It would be nice to see the Cowboys step to the front and give Micah his contract and kind of help this offseason go along. And I'd like to see it happen soon because we're going into free agency here in about a month, and it would be nice to have this contract done within the next 4 weeks so that the Cowboys know, hey, not only did we get Micah done, but we freed up that space. We carried over, 14 million or so because some of those accelerated bonuses and stuff hit. They had about 23 million, but that didn't count a lot of the incentives that players hit, like Cooper Rush hit some playtime incentives, and some of the rookies hit some playtime incentives. So those are all bonuses that you have to pay out that count against the cap that will eat that money that they carried over. But still, you create, let's say, 16 million with Micah's, and you probably carry over about 14 million from last year. So you got $30 million in cap space to play with going into free agency. While that's not a crap load, that's more than the Cowboys have had in years past. And you can go out now and sign a $10 million player, a $15 million player, an $8 million player. And then you can give those players some nice roster bonuses and some nice guarantees up front, that'll be a signing bonus so that it accelerates and it doesn't count against the cap for major numbers in future years, and it lowers their cap hit going into the season this year. Like, there's some ways you can do that, and there's some players that the Cowboys probably need to move on from, which we'll get into as we go along here this offseason. We got plenty of time now, so we can cover a little bit of everything that hopefully will help create even more cap space, right? So that's the first step in the Cowboys offseason, I think, is just kind of making sure, okay, we got our coaches and all that stuff together. Now let's get our vision aligned on how much money we want to allocate to free agency, right? And this way, once free agency is kind of done and we start focusing on the draft, maybe we can draft pure. Or maybe if you sign players that move the needle, it leaves you with very specific holes that now you're like, okay, we have a clear vision going into the draft now. We can say, hey, we didn't spend on a running back. We need that. Or we did spend on a running back, but we didn't spend on a wide receiver. We need that. The Cowboys need to make sure that they set themselves up for a clear vision and set that stuff up by having a game plan for each step of the way. The coaching staff, awesome. Thumbs up. I'll give it an A. Not necessarily an A+, but I give it an A. So that's the first step. Now, you can't just do that and nothing else and think you deserve a pat on the back and think you're going to go compete with Philadelphia. Now you need to follow up with the next step. And this is probably a multi-year process too. The Cowboys, if they do that this offseason, that'll be great, but that probably won't be enough to get them there. They're going to have to follow through and do the same thing next offseason. And then you would also like to hit on this set of draft picks, and next set of draft picks. If you can have two good drafts, two good off seasons as far as free agency signings and filling out your roster, now you're going into 2026 and you're saying, we have a chance this year. Now we do. What you would like to see is the Cowboys get a good enough roster and fill enough holes and have a good enough draft to compete for a playoff spot this year. That's kind of what you're looking at. And if it's not going to compete for a playoff spot, then that's fine. Let the young guys play. Let them learn with your mix of veterans. And like I said, have another good offseason next year and then go into that 2026 season trying to, do something that you haven't done by that time in 32 years. But thank you guys so much for tuning in. That's all I got for you. You can hit the like button, hit the subscribe button. You can follow me on Twitter at JMillerIYL. That's JMiller if you like. You can also hit me up at email on knockersonthebottom@outlook.com. Again, knockersonthebottom@outlook.com. You can also hit me up at knockersonthebottom@gmail.com. You can leave comments below, questions, anything specific that you want me to cover. I'll take them here. I'll take them via email. I'll take them via Twitter. Throw it into a mailbag. Make it a formal segment. We have 54 subscribers, so keep hitting that like button. Keep hitting that subscribe button. When we get to 100, we'll do another giveaway. But I love you guys. Thank you so much for tuning in. Until next time, I'm your host. This has been Knockers on the Bottom. I'm J Mill. J Mill if you like. Peace.